Hello, everyone. My name is Ragdale. I'm the artistic director here at Ragdale. It's a pleasure to have you here joining me in the Ragdale Ring info session for 2023. I hope you all can hear me okay. If not, if someone could just say in the chat. But we are recording, obviously, and we'll have questions and answers at the end. I don't think I'm going to actually go all the way to an hour and a half. In fact, I don't think anybody wants to be on this Zoom for that long. I'll briefly go over all the images and go through this PowerPoint just to give you an overview of the project. And then I'll open it up to questions. And of course, it's going to be recorded. So if you know any colleagues and you want to share it, it will be available pretty soon, in a couple of days, probably. But any case, again, my name is Ragdale. I've been working on the Ragdale Ring project since its inception back in 2013. And it's been quite a run. You know, we had our 10th anniversary celebration last year with this project that you see in front of you on the slideshow from Sick and Field Trip, the team that produced Echo, which was really pretty unique plan and design that is technically still in existence today. It's actually on location in the past, and I'll talk a little bit about the reason for that. But before I go into all of the guidelines and talk about the project, I just want to thank our promotional partner, AIA Chicago, who we've been working with since the beginning as well, helping us with the jury and getting the word out about this project. They've been really critical in terms of the success of this project. Of course, we've worked closely with and gotten support from the NEA, and so we want to thank them for always funding and supporting not only the Ragdale Ring, but all sorts of other projects that we've done here at Ragdale. I think probably all of you have been on the Ragdale website. If you haven't quite yet, there is a section under the events and programs under the Ragdale Ring competition that you could scroll through, and that'll have pretty much all the information that we are covering today and then some. If you scroll down far enough, you can of course peruse through the past 10 years of all the Ragdale Ring projects that have gone on since 2013. It's kind of a remarkable collection with links to all of the different artists and architect sites. So that's a nice sort of preview to the project, but I do want to talk quite a bit about some of the changes that have gone on and sort of the evolution of that project. When you scroll down on that page, you'll find that there are 4 links and buttons towards the bottom of that section. Of course, there's the register for the Ragdale Ring info session. That'll turn into a pre-recorded button or a link to a pre-recorded version of this info session that will be available on our YouTube channel. Below it is the Apply Now button that links you directly to the submittable application portal. That's where you'll officially submit your application. To the left of that is the Ragdale Ring RFP, and that's a PDF. Pretty much exactly what we're going to be talking about today, but that's a printable version if you want to cross-reference that. And then above that is a link to the 1927 Ragdale Ring article, which we'll get to in a minute, but that's an important historic sort of glimpse into the project that I think will be interesting for you all to read through or look through. What you're looking at right now is, and just mute this. It's a video that came out a few years back that some former staff people have put together, and it really gives you a nice overview of the Ragdale Ring as a theatrical venue that Howard Van Doren Shaw, the architect who designed Ragdale back at the turn of the century, all of the sort of historic anecdotes and such that you might be interested. We're not going to watch the whole thing. It's about a little over 8 minutes long, but you can see just as I glimpse through this, it gives all sorts of really nice historic references of Shaw's influences in his travels with his family, and how all of those inspirations kind of culminated in this backyard theater for his playwright wife, Frances, who essentially wrote all the plays that they performed for the community. So like I said, we're not going to watch the entirety of this video, but you can always check it out on our YouTube channel as well. So these are just some images that go back to the original design of the ring, and you could kind of see the map layout. Again, all of these are available on our website. It doesn't look anything like that. There are a couple of images that we'll peruse through, and then I actually have not taken any recent updated pictures of this house where the ring is. You could kind of see the stone wall when it was back in the day set up as the Ragdale ring, the original ring. And then this is actually about 2 years ago, the photo on the left. And it's the image, sorry, go back here. It's the image of the front of the house, which was built in the 40s, and it essentially got built right on top of the original location of the ring. And the curve that you're seeing is facing, or so on the photo on the left, we're facing west to where the lower portion of the ring is, and that's where the audience typically sat. And then on the photo on the right from back in the day is actually the stage. So those two pillars flanked the stage, and the arborvitae trees created the cover for technically, or essentially, what was the backstage. And I think it's important that we cross-reference this really interesting article from 1927 that Walter Popham had written about the Ragdale ring. I think it was in an article in House Beautiful that explained the vision and the sort of the at that point what had happened in the Ragdale ring in terms of theatrical productions and such. But there's a very important paragraph here in the beginning that talks a lot about this outdoor venue, this stage that Shaw designed as being a theater of the intimate. That's really where our theme comes from. I think it's essential to read it just to get the context of the history of the project and the theater itself and the venue itself. But I think more importantly, I want to talk a little bit about just the evolution of the project, because of course that was back in 1927 when that article was written, and the first production happened in 1912. But you know, the project has evolved, and even within the 10 years since it was revived by our former director back in 2013, when the Ragdale Ring became a design build competition. And it's just important to know that the expectations, and we'll talk about this in depth as we go along with these project guidelines, but I just want to stress and make sure that all of you know that because of this sort of constant changing of not only what residencies are, but I think just the nature of art and design, you know, people trying to consistently innovate, consistently come up with versions or reactions to things. It's definitely applicable to all the things going on with the Ragdale Ring. And it has to do with the limitations of the campus. The main thing that I want to talk about is the changes that have been happening on the campus itself. So I'm going to actually swing back a couple of images because I want to show you all this house. So the house on the left, we call it the Hart House, and it was actually part of the original, what we call the trifecta of the Ragdale campus of the different homes, when the generations of the family kind of moved along and progressed. The three daughters of Howard essentially inherited the different buildings that were on campus. So by the time Ragdale turned into an official residency program in 1976, we technically only had the one house that Alice Hayes lived in. And then we slowly acquired the barn house, which is the original farmhouse that was on the estate. Another building was built, the original Friends studio in the 90s. And then in 2019, this house on the left was purchased from the Hart family. So it returned back to the Ragdale campus. And since 2019, December of 2019, we've been renovating and refurbishing, making it up to code, installing a sprinkler system and things like that. But it is going to be used as an expansion of the residency program in hopefully a couple of months. So what you're looking at, because it was a couple of years old when this photo was taken, has already gone through some changes, mostly just the landscape. So those sidewalks that you're looking at, the little pathways, have been converted to fully accessible pathways. And that's one thing that Ragdale has really become proud of. We're one of the only residency programs that are almost fully accessible, and we've really strived to accommodate accessibility needs. And so this house will have a little bit of a change when you take a look at the facade, but for the most part, the area where we're proposing this project take place is going to be in front of this house. So let's see, let's move this slideshow on. So let's talk about that project guidelines. What we are asking people to do is to essentially design a stage similar to what Shaw had proposed to do in the landscape, to allow creative types to share their work. We are a residency program, keep that in mind. So we're not really made to be a black box theater, nor are we made essentially or designed to be officially a performance venue. And so we always have envisioned, and we've always regarded the Ragdale Ring project as kind of an experimental space. And that's one thing that's really important to know. It's an opportunity for architects and designers and artists to think about how their work as architects and designers sort of question what architecture is. That's always kind of been a main focus. It's also allowed for artists to think about how they want to share their work in something that isn't really quite a black box theater. Not only is it outdoors, but you know, it's not really set up with all the lighting and, you know, sort of the blackout spaces that one typically would identify with a performance area or stage. So there are some limitations. And because of the particular space that we would like to focus this project on, we're asking that whatever the design you come up with, really focus on a square 20-foot by 20-foot wooden deck that will essentially be built by Ragdale in advance of the design build residency that takes place in May. And so you're basically designing around that platform. So whether it be, you know, if you want to think of it as creating backdrops or a way to sort of define the perimeter of those spaces, think about what would be essentially used to design or complement that flat sort of blank canvas of the 20 by 20 foot deck. Keep in mind that the performances that are going to be curated into the season of performances will essentially be music. So musicians, bands, and other sort of musical sort of forms. There's probably going to be dance. There may be readings and spoken word storytelling, things related to that. But it really is about showcasing the work in an official sort of outdoor setting that is fairly unique. So when I talk about that, I want you to all keep in mind that it is in front of that house, and we'll take a look at the map again just so you can see the exact setting. And we'll just quickly go through all of these so that you can, oh, here we are, number 2, so that we can see all the details. But essentially, you're designing elements that will exist outdoors around that deck space that's 20 by 20s. And then again, that's the elevated spot that's above the lower sort of seating area in that quasi round area. Because of the particular scale and location of this space, we want the designers to really think about how lighting and sound might be used. Again, we're not a black box theater, so we don't have all of the necessary equipment or bits of equipment that you might typically find in an outdoor performance venue like Ravinia or one of these, band shells that you might find in a big city. This is essentially just like how Howard Van Doren Shaw designed it. When you read his article, or that article about the Ragdale ring, they talk about how there were several lanterns that were designed as the lighting mechanism, and electricity was relatively new. It's one of the rare properties that actually had electrical lighting in the outdoors, and so it was kind of a unique opportunity for people to experience theater in that way back in the day. But because of that, we'd like for you to think about how you might address lighting in this design. Whether you use the $10,000 award to buy equipment or to buy materials to build sort of the accoutrements of the stage, that's completely up to you. But essentially, that is the grant amount that you would be receiving. And then anything that's additional, in case your budget requires more, would of course be something that you would have to fundraise on your own. At the end of the project, this is technically a warm season project, but keep in mind that this has sort of evolved too, just because of the location and because of this idea of the intimate setting. We're hoping that all of the residents who are occupying the space and the Ragdale residency year round would be using it as well throughout the year. So even in November and December, they may, use it as a space to sort of do intimate readings just for their group, just for their cohort, and not necessarily for the general public. But as part of the project, you should keep in mind how the project will be dismantled, how we might reuse the materials, how we might recycle the materials, how some of those materials might be used in another context outside of the Ragdale ring, just as trying to be conscientious of sustainability and how much stuff we put out into the world. So of course, it'll require your plans, sketches, and designs. We could talk about that in detail a little bit later, but essentially all of that, I think most of you are probably versed in putting together proposals, but it's pretty open to however you define your style and how you want to portray your rendering of your design. One of the most important things is, of course, is conveying to the jury that the team that you put together to actually design this is capable of doing this. So not only being able to get here for the design build residency, but that you've got enough experience in terms of handling materials and working with other experts in the field to design or produce or fabricate any essential parts to your project. Of course, the team is expected to travel to Ragdale. You'd have to provide your own insurance while you're here, just like all of our residents do in general. Everything that's designed, of course, has to meet safety requirements and has to be safe to be used by the performers. We've had in the past consultant, volunteer engineers even take a look at the projects when it required it, but I don't think in most cases that's going to be necessary. You just have to, be sort of practical about the design in terms of the safety of it. And likewise, all of this has to be approved by the city of Lake Forest, and generally the staff will work closely with the winning team to make sure that it's conducive to all of that. So I want to once again go back to the site of the Ragdale ring. This is just a Google map of the layout of the campus. So if you've never been to Ragdale or Lake Forest, you should know that it's 30 miles north of Chicago, and we're in a residential suburb. So you can see we're not anywhere, well, I guess technically we're near a big city. We're 30 miles north of Chicago, but because of the residential suburb setting, we are in the middle of civilization. It's not like we're out in the middle of the desert or in the forest, even though it kind of looks like that in this map. But Lake Forest is a fairly well-to-do community with a lot of big estates. Green Bay Road is a north-south road that connects to the city of Chicago pretty directly. There's a train line immediately east, commuter rail. So we're only about a mile away from downtown Lake Forest, which is, has all the amenities. So in the immediate campus, you'll see the different houses, but the location of the ring itself is where that red circle is. And to the left of that, or to the west of the ring, is the house that you, actually, we'll take a look at this next image. So that's sort of the direct location of it. And you'll see that, just outside of Green Bay Road, there are two roadways that are sort of ghost-like images that flank the circle. So that area is surrounded by trees, and we're sort of away from traffic. So in the sense of how much noise traffic has and the proximity to traffic and people cutting through, it's pretty intimate and quiet. And it is in the thick of summer, of course, covered in trees and foliage. So it is kind of secluded. In the past, you'll notice all the little open areas on the campus of the Ragdale campus. And we used to have, in fact, some of our themes were all about designing things that were a little bit more mobile. That was one of our themes in the past, where we essentially encouraged people to think about using multiple spaces. But the last couple of years have been really hard. I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush on that and sort of deny how much COVID has had an impact on how we share our work, financially, how that's had an impact on all the things we've been doing. The fact that we've not only acquired this house, but also built a new dance studio. All of these factors have come into play in terms of how expansive this project has become. And in an ideal world, we would get all the funding from everybody and get to do the most elaborate project. But we've sort of reduced it to a smaller scale project. And I hate to use the word reduced because it sounds like it's minimizing the whole project, when in fact, I think it's actually sort of expanded the notion of experiencing performance and experiencing the work of artists, because we are returning to some of the central tenets of Howard Van Doren Shaw and his sort of vision for what an outdoor theater might be. When you think about just this idea of who gets to experience the work, and this is really critical for the design, I believe, because we're a residency program, our campus is essentially closed off to the public for the most part. I mean, we are a historic site, so we are technically a public space, but we don't have frequent visitors. It is time and space that's quiet and reserved for the focused practice of writers, visual artists, musicians, composers in a secluded retreat-like setting. So it is all about sort of that quiet moment in a residency. So we really want to embrace that and think about that article that Popham had written about what it means to be a theater of the intimate. When I was a residency when I was overseeing the residency program and lived on campus many, many years ago, and experienced my first open studio with the residents. It was a profound experience. We were invited to the composer's studio, and at the time it was this trombonist Jim Staley from New York who was playing this trombone, and I recall sitting 5 feet away from him, and I'd never experienced that before. This sort of salon style preview, this glimpse into the artist's world, their creative process. And along with just a dozen other people, we were there crammed in this little space, and the music was just profoundly moving. I mean, it was the kind of thing that I feel like only artists who are in residence together get to experience, because they're willing to share that intimate glimpse into the creative process with just that cohort. And so we're really trying to embrace that experience of these sort of studio visits that happen during a residency. And we're kind of returning back to the sort of central focus of giving all the artists the attention and sort of mimicking that experience of a residency program. So keep that in mind, when it comes to the design. This is where, again, the project, because of the scale of the budget, it might not be this elaborate built structure. It might be more how you highlight through lighting and sound the performer. This is just a clip that it's just a screenshot of the video, the historic Ragdale Ring video that I had shown you earlier. You go, halfway into the video, there's a section where the camera pans through this pathway. This is actually the pathway that leads to the ring. So that's still there, albeit the stone path is actually some new bluestone that's really quite lovely. And this goofy chain link fence is no longer there. But it is, sort of like the section of the video that I'd like for you all to take a look at when you get a chance to really kind of get a sense of where it is. So going back to the actual project, the program, aside from designing and building this performance venue, there is a residency involved, and that is, over the years, been one of the most valuable parts of this project. To receive the Ragdale Ring residency is about giving your team of designers, whether it be a team of 1 or a team of, I think we've had at the most a team of 4 people as the official designers, bring in a crew of up to 10 people, 10 to 12 people to be in residence with them, and to have that time together to not only build and execute the actual venue, but to also have that essential time together. In the past, our residents, our winning architects, have turned it into an educational program where they've brought their students, and had them assist in some of the build out. The 18 days that they've been there, they've split into various activities, from trips to the city to do research, to programs with high school students and younger, with some of the school partnerships that we have. Because it's the summer, that's fairly limited, but we've definitely had students engage with the architects in the past. Actually, it's not fully summer, it's like the tail end. It's usually, before the school year ends. So there is that possibility of interacting with students, and we've definitely done workshops in the past with some of our school partners. But that time and space is really pretty fantastic. You're housed and fed with our wonderful chef Linda preparing dinners 5 nights out of the week, and the kitchen's all stocked with food, so you can basically have a run of the show the entire time you're there, as well as the campus. But it is open to everyone, so it's been sort of regarded as an architectural project, but it really is open to anyone who considers themselves a designer or architect, or artist, I should say. So quickly, just the application instructions, it's pretty straightforward. If you've never used a submittable portal, we can go over that later, but essentially it's an online submission where everything is put together, submitted online. So all your documents are digital, including a written proposal. And I'm just going to click through all of these because we're going to go through them individually. And the written proposal, of course, explains exactly what your project is about, how it's related to the historic ring and how it relates to the theme, and how you're addressing some of the ideas of the theme. The actual visual components of the proposal will be, technically it could be more than 5 to 8 digital images. You know, if you want to put it together into a PDF with several images, that's totally fine. You know, I think all of you as architects and designers have probably done many versions of this in terms of proposals, but I think for Ragdale, it's fairly open-ended. You could submit a video to supplement the experience of maybe walking through the space. I know some teams have really put together some really elaborate animations in the past to show the jurors exactly how their project might be experienced. That's always very helpful, but it's not required. You know, and we've had everything from hand-drawn renderings to digitally produced, you know, animated clips and videos, like I said. So it's fairly open-ended, and just whatever it'll take to get your project showcase or explain to the jurors in the best possible way really kind of helps. And you could see these are all just examples of different types of proposal components. If as designers and artists, you probably have previous work samples of projects that were similar or things that are related. So we'd like to get a few images of that also included as digital documentation. And I think, you know, probably if you've done this before, but Submittable, like many of the other platforms, will accept pretty much any type of file. So anything from PDFs to video to sound, anything that will go through Submittable is basically what the jurors can see. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, when it comes to the resume or CV, if your team is made up of one person, that's easy enough. Or I should say the applicant is made up of one person, then you just submit one resume. But if your team is made up of more than that, we would love to get a resume or CV from each of you, just to see how each team member will be contributing and sort of what their background is. Help us get a really nice overview of who makes up the team. And you could see all of these photos of the previous teams and other projects. They weren't all the team members. They were part of the residency team for sure. But in terms of the designers who are applying, like I said in the past, it's always been usually a couple of people or 2 to 4 people at the most. Quickly, the timeline is running around pretty quickly. I know we were a little bit delayed, but that's mostly because of our construction projects happening since the acquirement of the Hart House. But our deadline is March 27th, followed immediately by a pretty quick jury process. So in the beginning of April, we'll hopefully have the notification sent to the winning team so that you can spend both April and the beginning part of May doing any offsite production or working out, you know, logistics of travel and production and all of that. And that we work very closely with. You'll essentially be working closely with me on determining all of that. Last year's, you know, with the Echo project, it was very much about the landscape. And so we worked closely with our landscape designers and people here on this end, and so that they were in conversation pretty early on. And depending on what your project is, you know, it might entail working with lighting designers and such, maybe people who are local rather than, you know, from where you're applying from, to make it easier. We can definitely help with that. And of course, the jurors will take a look at that, you know, again, as part of the feasibility. Are you requesting the help from people who will be too expensive to bring on to the team, you know, those types of things? Are you thinking very practically about how, you know, bringing equipment or people to Ragdale, and how what the feasibility is of that. All of those factors will be looked at. And then the residency itself is May 22nd through June 9th. So we would expect that the whole design be pretty much done by the beginning of June. And that's really my presentation. I just wanted to end by showing a few other images. This was last year's Echo project designed by Sick and Field Trip. And you can see kind of the layout of this sort of outdoor stage-like setting. It's going to be smaller scale than that. I think the diameter of this wood chip slanted area is about 30 feet. So it would be, it would be 20 feet. So it would be about 2/3 of that. And then again, think about the intimacy of it. We're not going to have this huge lawn, really. It's going to be the front of that house, and it's going to be flanked by closer tree lines and pathways. This is just a little video. I'm not going to watch or play this whole thing. But again, all of these videos are available on our YouTube channel, but you could take a look at some of the performances that have occurred over the years. This was last summer, dancers. In the case of rain, which almost always seems to happen each year, we'll bring the performance indoors. We've got kind of a nice venue now with a new dance studio built where we would just sort of shift the experience of it, which sort of deflects the idea of experiencing the Ragdale Ring. But again, we're trying to establish more opportunities for the ring to be used, not just by performers that are curated, but by the residents who are there in session and other projects that might come along. I just wanted to throw this image in from Buru from back in 2014 because they were very attentive to this idea of what it might be experienced at night, and playing with lighting. A couple of other projects have done that. Almost Studio did one where there was basically solar powered lights that traversed across the entire campus, which is really quite lovely. Not too many people got to experience it, but the residents who were here experienced it, and that was really pretty special. And then just a couple of overview shots. A lot of lately, over the course of the 11 years that we've been doing this, technology has changed. And it seemed like just within the last 4 years, everybody was bringing a drone and really trying to capture the essence of what it might be like to experience the Ragdale Ring. And of course, your project will help dictate how that experience might be. And maybe it won't require a drone because it's a much closer sort of tighter knit space. But again, keep in mind that there's all sorts of different performances going on. The stages, the dancers that perform, you'll see in some of these images, have really kind of used the entirety of the campus. And again, we're not going there this year. I just wanted to show you this just as an example of, like the amount of people that have shown up in the past. It may be very similar to that. It may be much less. People tend to stay away from the stage, which is kind of a funny thing. I've always thought that was peculiar, people wanting to avoid being close to the performers. It's kind of the opposite this year. We're encouraging this proximity with the audience and the artists as close as possible. Henceforth, a theater of the intimate. That stage that Almost Studio has in this video is about 20 by 20, I believe. Except it's a round shape. So if you can envision all of these people kind of closer to that stage, flanked by trees in that area, it'll give you a better sense of, I'll just get to the next slide, of what it's like to experience it. This is just another performance with Kinnari Borea and Tuidera. A lot of this was happening, again, because it was encouraged in those previous years. And again, this might be something that you as the designers might not necessarily have to think about, but is a possibility. We can talk a little bit more about some people we have lined up. We're kind of in a transition right now with who our curators are going to be and who's going to be designing the performance lineup for this year. But again, keep in mind that we're looking for much more intimate sort of experiences as well from people that are not in this particular setting, from people who are, just within the cohort of the 12 to 14 residents who are in session. And then I also wanted to just finish off by, again, talking about these other sort of people who use the stage or the venue. We have an annual high school arts week program that takes place in the middle of July. We also have a teacher retreat that takes place. So there, aside from the artists who are performing for the public, aside from the residents who are there in session, there are a lot of people who come to the Ragdale campus from the community who never experienced this type of thing because it's such a peculiar sort of project. Like with Noodle Soup, it was a lot of fun because it essentially was like this playground. And we had so many students sort of running up and down these things. And again, completely different this year. It's not necessarily going to encourage you to expand on this level, but again, think about that interaction, that sort of intimate interaction that's going to transpire between the entirety of the Ragdale community, artists, staff, visitors, locals in the Lake Forest community, people from Chicago coming into town to, visit. There are a lot of people who come across the campus that you may not be aware of. And so we can talk more about that, but it is very open to that sort of world. So I am going to stop the recording, and then we'll just leave the remainder of this time to questions. Again, we don't have to use the entire hour and a half, but I'll be available to talk to anyone about any questions that you might have. Thank you all for your attention.